A lot of the drivers protested this, including one that came into the pits and said, "What do you want me to do? Get out and push the thing. I just stopped for a drink at the Hippodrome." And he actually had stopped for a drink in the middle of the race. So one of the things that I think that I'm fascinated with automotive history is the early racing in the pre-war period. This, in my mind, is one of the most exciting periods because as we started racing, cars got exponentially faster every year. Technology changed. Innovation was seemingly on a different path than it had been. This is the time when automotive dynasties rose. And one of those automotive dynasties that, is still around today is Bentley Motors. W.O. Bentley started, his company in 1919. And even though the company failed in 1931, he managed to win Le Mans 5 times, which it is something not many companies have been able to do. But the other thing is it firmly created the British obsession with Le Mans. From that point forward, the Brits were obsessed with that endurance race. And in terms of automotive history, that is very important. Each Le Mans that Bentley won has its own story. But in terms of pure excitement, the 1930 race really was the pinnacle of their success. And also one of the first times that I can tell as a historian that a racing team had a very clear, concise strategy of how to win and how to defeat a faster opponent that was a car that was being driven by the world's #1 racing driver at the time, and probably one of the greatest drivers to ever live. So this story really starts the year before at Le Mans in 1929. At the 1929 race, it's an absolute blowout by Bentley Motors. Bentley Motors wins. They not only win, they take 2nd place, 3rd place, and 4th place. Halfway through the 29 race, W.O. Bentley ordered his team very directly to reduce their speed because he was very paranoid that people would actually know what his machines were capable of. A lot of the drivers protested this, including one that came into the pits and said, "What do you want me to do? Get out and push the thing. I just stopped for a drink at the Hippodrome." And he actually had stopped for a drink in the middle of the race, which is something that probably would be frowned upon today in racing circles. The 1930 race rolls around, and this time the British team of Bentleys is actually facing a very formidable opponent. This opponent being Mercedes-Benz. Mercedes shows up with a Mercedes SS, one of probably the greatest cars, and it's piloted by probably one of the greatest racing drivers to ever live, Rudy Caracciola. Rudy was well respected, known throughout various Grand Prix wins, known as an absolute master behind the wheel. Even today, when you read about some of his racing exploits, it's pretty clear he probably, in the great scheme of things, probably in the top 10 drivers to ever live. So Bentley Motors had this problem. They had raced against the SS Mercedes at various other races. Their drivers, including Tim Birkin, had faced Caracciola, in many cases lost. This was a car that was powered by one of the most advanced engines of the time, an engine designed by Ferdinand Porsche. And what was interesting about it is it wasn't just a big motor. It was an over 7-liter 6-cylinder, but it also had a clutch-activated supercharger. This made this car one of the most powerful road cars in existence, one of the original hypercars, if you will. So Bentley had this problem. How were they going to beat a faster car and a car driven by arguably the greatest driver alive at the time? They kind of came up with this very interesting strategy. And that year, there were 6 Bentleys in the race. There were 3 Speed 6 team cars that were run by the factory. And then there were 3 supercharged 4.5 cars entered that were run by Tim Birkin and his financial backer, an Honorable Miss Dorothy Paget, who's a very interesting tale for another time. And when they arrived in France, they had a series of problems that they needed to overcome. First of all, the blower 4.5s on the petrol that was provided by the French officials for the race were not running well. The fuel had too low of octane, the cars were pinging, overheating, having all sorts of issues. Bentley, who was in charge basically of his own factory team cars, but it was also kind of consulting with the blowers, knew that he needed those blower 4.5s to harass the Mercedes, because he knew the only way of beating that car was by breaking it. Over a period, they decided to run the blower 4.5s on a pure benzyl fuel, which is a fairly obnoxious, carcinogenic liquid that you really can't run anymore. And in order to do this, they had to work all night on 2 of the blower 4.5s to modify the engines so that they would work on pure benzyl. This involved taking compression plates out, changing valve timing, doing all sorts of things to make these cars work. And the drivers had decided they would take turns harassing Caracciola and Werner, his teammate, forcing them to use the clutch-activated supercharger, which, believe it or not, Mercedes-Benz advertised as something only to be used for limited bursts of speed. It was not something that you were meant to use all the time. Very impressive piece of intel that, basically Mercedes published in their sales literature. The race begins, and on the Bentley team, there was a number of experienced Le Mans racers. Wolf Barnado had won Le Mans in 1929 and in 1928. He was in one of the Speed 6 cars. Tim Birkin had won Le Mans in 1929. He was in one of the blower 4.5s. Dudley Benjerfield, who had won Le Mans in 1927. He was in another blower. So they really had a very good group of drivers who'd driven together. They partied together. They were a concise team with a united vision to beat the Mercedes and bring Le Mans home basically to Britain once again. The race starts, Caracciola takes off in the Mercedes, setting blistering lap times. And the first person that is pursuing him for the Bentley team is none other than Tim Birkin. Tim Birkin was a charismatic playboy racer who is pretty much everything you would think right now a Bentley boy would be. Lots of money, lots of skill, and probably one of the most gifted British drivers in the 1920s. Unfortunately, he died in the early 30s because he probably would have had a seat on the German Grand Prix teams in the later 30s if he would have lived. So Birkin takes off in the blower, chasing Caracciola. In the first series of laps, they managed to break lap records over and over again, going faster and faster each time. The very much climax of this is Caracciola is hauling down the Mulsanne Straight at 120 miles an hour. Birkin approaches him at over 127. Caracciola doesn't know he's coming. Can't hear him over the supercharger because the Mercedes SS is uncomfortably loud. Caracciola later said in his later life, this was the fright of his life because suddenly, out of nowhere, Birkin overtakes him on the grass at 130 miles an hour, right before the hairpin bend at the end of the straight. And so this duel goes on and on and on. The blower 4.5 cars have various problems with tires. The Mercedes keeps up a blistering pace. But every single time a Bentley driver has to pit his car or has to back off or change drivers, another car takes its place. And it is a relentless pressure. The best of this is probably done by Wolf Barnado, who isn't as fast as Caracciola, but Wolf had a freaky ability with race cars. He knew exactly how hard he could push them and exactly what they needed. This is something that W.O. Bentley later commented in his memoir, that Wolf Barnado was perhaps one of the finest race car drivers he'd ever met because of his ability to do this and his ability to drive the car within its means. No matter how hard Caracciola drove, he was always looking back in his rearview mirror and seeing a Bentley pushing him. And this went on into the night for over 10 hours, at which point the Mercedes starts to have significant issues. And this is also where part of the story gets interesting, because Mercedes, unfortunately, is forced to retire in, the early morning. The car's in the pits. They can't start it. They can't make it work. And they apparently withdraw the car for electrical failure. W.O. Bentley is said later that he went over to the Mercedes pits and he saw the hood open of the car and a vast puddle of water beneath it and, a lot of steam. And he commented later that electrical system was quite peculiar. Morning breaks, the Mercedes is basically retired. Tim Birkin's car, which had been set up basically to chase the Mercedes down, has a connecting rod failure. Dudley Benjerfield, who in the other blower 4.5 had been putting up an absolute heroic drive as his co-driver, had developed a stomach flu and couldn't drive, had driven the car for 16 hours straight. That car breaks. Another one of the Speed 6 Bentleys crashed, but at the end of the Le Mans race, 2 vintage Bentleys crossed the finish line, 2 Speed 6s, and Wolf Barnotto completes his hat trick, was the first Le Mans racing driver to hat-trick Le Mans, winning it, 28, 29, and 30. And at this point in time, cheers and champagne all around. They'd won Le Mans once again for Great Britain. And sadly, that was the beginning of the end, because right after that victory, Bentley Motors officially retired from racing, and the company would be liquidated 18 months later. But that basically cemented them as a automotive dynasty. The Speed 6 was arguably the finest car W.O. Bentley ever made. It was fast, powerful. It was the evolution of the standard 6.5 car that they started making in 1926. The standard 6.5 was seen as a luxury automobile. The Speed 6 was a car that, with certain performance mods to make it a little bit more of the perfect owner-driver car. And to be argued, it was probably also could be considered one of the original hypercars, as a Model A Ford had 40 horsepower. A Speed 6 Bentley was running around with 180 horsepower. The team cars had further modifications that pushed their horsepower rating over 220. The blower 4.5 was the brainchild of Sir Henry Birkin. It in many ways is ironic. Whenever any car nut is asked to picture a Bentley in their head, a lot of times a blower 4.5 is the image that appears. But it was a commercial failure. It was a commercial failure, and also it was one of the cars that led to the downfall of Bentley Motors. Tim Birkin's idea to squeeze more performance out of the standard 4.5, and he got this idea after racing in the German Grand Prix in 1928. And when he was there, he ran into the Mercedes SS, and he realized 4.5 liters versus 7.5 liters supercharged just wasn't going to work, and they were outclassed. So his idea was, well, let's put a bloody big supercharger on the front of it and see what happens. Because he wanted to race these cars at Le Mans, Bentley Motors was forced to homologate the car, and so they were forced to build 50 production blowers. These cars were very expensive to build. They were a very big price increase over the standard 4.5. Many people just saw them as kind of, well, a little superfluous, because in a 4.5 Bentley, you were able to go 80 miles an hour comfortably. Why did you need a car that would go 100, especially when the national speed limit was 40 miles an hour? And that was the truth of it. But basically, the main difference is the Speed 6 is a naturally aspirated big motor car, which is what W.O. Bentley saw as the way to go. If you wanted to make a faster car, make a bigger engine. The blower 4.5 is a 4.5 liter Bentley engine with a supercharger on the front of it. But it is very funny that when people think of vintage Bentleys now, a blower is often the car that pops into their mind. And that's actually partially due to Tim Birkin being a very good promoter of his brand and a very romantic figure. Birkin lived hard, played hard. He died young, really before his racing career really kind of reached its height, dying of probably malaria, which was brought on by a racing injury. He had malaria once, he recovered from it. Later on, he was racing in Tripoli in a Maserati. He burned himself on the hot exhaust, and 2 weeks later developed a very strange sickness that actually his close friend, Dr. Dudley Benderfield, who was also one of his teammates at Bentley, treated him for. And it's interesting when you go back through his medical notes, it's like this person Birkin probably didn't have blood poisoning. He probably had picked up malaria again in Tripoli along with this injury, and that killed him. But he was kind of this figure in the late 1920s, early 1930s that kind of epitomized the Bentley boy and epitomized the gentleman racing driver. And because of that, and because he had kind of a very flamboyant personality, the blower Bentley kind of gained a distinct spot in automotive history. But when you look at it as a car, in terms of the other cars that W.O. Bentley built, it was by far the not very successful, and it was one of the things that led to the downfall of the company. So it's kind of strange to think about them that way. If you're talking about absolutely pure blower 4.5s, and there are a couple semi-Le Mans cars, they are trading above 10 million. When you think about a Speed 6, a original Le Mans bodied Speed 6, there are only 3 of those cars left in original specification. That being the number 2 Speed 6 that was second at Le Mans and won the Brooklands 012. The number 3 car that actually I think is on the market right now being offered by Broad Arrow Auctions. And then there is the car that is in the Revs Institute, which is the only production Speed 6 that was ordered to Le Mans specifications. So in some ways a much rarer thing, and in terms of money, those cars and a semi-Le Mans blower or even perhaps a team blower are probably equal in value, just when you think about it. But the truth is there are not many of them around, so the market is, let's say, very thin when you're talking about those pure examples.
Buying a used car without getting ripped off is all about research, and we can pull a Carfax or look on the VINwiki app, but there is nothing like an in-person inspection. And the fastest, cheapest, and easiest way to do that is with the Lemon Squad. Lemon Squad has been a longtime sponsor here at VINwiki, and they have representatives all over the country that can put eyes and hands on a car and send you a detailed inspection report plus pictures, usually within 24, 48, even 72 hours. And so there's nothing that makes you a shrewder negotiator than the information that you're going to get from a real person actually seeing the car. So check out the Lemon Squad now at the link in the description below for a special discount. And if you do want a Carfax, they'll even save you $10 on that. The Lemon Squad is who I use every time I'm trying to negotiate a deal, because I can't always be there, especially if it's across the country, but their nationwide network of inspectors can do just that. So check them out now to thank them for their support of VINwiki and buy your car more safely with the Lemon Squad.